Thank you very much, Ms. Arredondo. I have one more card of someone who has donated his time to Ms. Louis Schmidt. Are there anybody else who'd like to testify on the issue of AFSCME Local 2384 Unit 2 negotiations? Okay, so Mr. Schmidt. Frank, I did indicate that you'd have a chance to respond on the issue. Keep it as reasonably short as
be
possible,
1 minute.
and then I'll let Mr. Schmidt, and then we'll move on. Thank you.
So, Vice Mayor Waring, you're correct. I see you checked my personal Facebook page from December, and I did make a disparaging comment on Sal DeCiccio. I apologize to Sal. I do find it interesting that the Vice Mayor of the 5th largest city in this nation looks at my personal Facebook page, takes screenshots, and saves them in a file for months, but I guess that's good use of taxpayer dollars.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Pacholi. Okay, Mr. Schmidt, Aaron Blake has donated his time to you. Obviously, you had a chance at the beginning to present, but if you have a kind of a final closing remark, obviously.
Yes, I do. Thank you, City Manager, Mayor, and members of the City Council, and thank you to all the employees who just spoke up and the citizens who just spoke up. And it takes bravery. It took bravery for Untitled Arredondo to come here before you today. It took bravery for Joe DeFelice to come. And Reverend Maupin, if you're still here, thank you for that brilliant comment. And if you spoke from the heart, and that's what we need. I mean, let's just look at what this deficit is doing, what this budget is doing. We all see that the City Council and the Mayor's budget has increased. Each one of them has an increase in their budgets. Everybody's being asked to sacrifice. Item number 30 in the council agenda today, which is, I don't know if it's going to be moved or not again, item number 30 is going to give $1.2 million in additional money to Veolia, the French company doing the bus operations. That's been continued several times, but when I looked at the description, it says for some overhead and benefits. While we're going to cut benefits from these employees, we're going to go ahead and do something for Veolia. So maybe it was a wise decision to move it from today, but again, we need transparency in these contracts. We need transparency, and again, it's just hard because we don't see it. You've heard good comments today. You've heard about what this deficit does. You know, at the end of the day, this is not about the unions. It's not about your personal agendas or your personal beliefs. This is about the services and the rank and file employees. That's what this is about. I'm not here to tell you to do this or do that. I'm just here, you need to listen. You need to listen to the stories of the families. I believe also there's about 250 plus cards, Mayor, that people don't want to speak that should be up there somewhere. Like I said, AFSCME respects what the fellow police officers, want to speak about. So we're going to go ahead and, all those are just opposed to this budget deficit that you're going to try to balance on the employees once again. Council members, we have hard decisions to make. You guys were all elected because you brought something to your constituents. You've heard your constituents talk about they care for the valuable services that the police, fire, and the 911 operator provides. Everybody provides an integral part. You start trying to pick and choose, trying to take away that foundation, you might as well just wash it away. And I'm glad that you guys didn't ask our attorney any more questions because, I was going to charge you guys for his bill. But anyways, I released him. So if you have any questions, I'll answer your questions. Excuse me? Yeah. So anyways, I'm just going to read this last, something that I wrote, and then we'll go ahead and let the unit for the police officers, have their say. Numerous times, Frank and I have come before you. We always speak for respective members. We are now at a point where we are being forced into a situation where we are supposed to tell our members to take the medicine to take the medicine that is being served. We do not like it. Then the council has something worse in store for us. So we were pushed and pushed and pushed. If you don't do this, if you don't agree, then the council's going to hit you worse. The council's going to hit you worse. I cannot in good conscience stand here and claim to believe that the best deal the city has to offer labor. You need to understand, we are fighting to defend our homes, our families, and what labor has brought to this organization. We have petitioned you about concerns, and you wave our petitions away. We have begged you, and some of the council has mocked us. At this point, we no longer beg or petition you. For the past year, I have been hearing how we are responsible for the deficit we find ourselves in. Was it because I asked for a pension? Because I asked for sick leave and vacation time? Bless you. Because I asked for the ability to retire with a living wage? We asked and we negotiated. The city agreed and the council approved. numerous previous budgets, MOUs, this council approved. Now some choose to hide their complicity by claiming they did not know what was in the agreement. If I were the constituent of the type of representative, I would be concerned for someone incapable of reading such a pretty simple document. Now, I am the enemy. The person who makes sure that the water coming out of your faucet is clean. The employees, Richard Santos, if he doesn't do his job right, the water doesn't get to the Palo Verde nuclear power plant. We saw what happened in Japan with that disaster. We don't want that here. We have dedicated city employees who provide that service as you sleep. The mechanic who knew that higher education was not a cup of tea, the guy who wanted to be a mechanic and now ensures that police cruisers run smoothly, me, the one who makes sure that fire trucks and emergency vehicles are always running smoothly. I am the one you expect to pick up the trash. I am the one you expect to read your meters so you are not overcharged on your water bill. The person on the council members call when the light goes out in their office or when the temperature in the same office is too hot or too cold. I serve your needs, and because of that, I am public enemy number one. Now, all labor has to stand here and listen to you berate us, emphasize our lack of education, treating us as if I'm the one who stole the city's money. We simply ask for a fair living wage. We ask for concessions to be returned, and we were made to believe we were wrong for making these requests. Somehow we have changed from being a valued city employee to becoming your enemy. Somehow the services we provide are desired by the same people who are determined to cut our wages. We are forced to accept more concessions based on the threat that you, the council, have something worse in mind. And yet, what has been our sin? Giving you clean water, picking up your trash, making sure the roads are paved, that traffic lights work, and our convention center is functioning at 100%, so that city gets revenue to run. Add to this the hypocrisy of this council. Not once, but twice, giving the city manager a combined $141,000 raise. This council rescinded the food tax earlier than scheduled, which was to have kept us out of this mess. The council also took part in a lawsuit that cost $347,000. There's also a department that wasted over $500,000 of unused inventory. That is close to $1 million thrown in the trash bin. And yet, on the backs of labor, that is million, plus an additional $38 million more to be recovered. We do not dream of a higher office. We only dream of being able to support our families, to be sure that they have good, food on their tables, clothes on their back, and the ability to get a good education. Because Councilman Warren reminded us, our lack of education is the reason we have been put in this situation. I saw a quote and I thought it was very appropriate for what labor is going through. I will paraphrase it as follows. You shall not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns. You shall not crucify labor upon a cross of social media. Let me close with this. Speaking as labor, we do not accept your picture of us. Sal, we do not accept your picture of me. Jim, our hands are rough and calloused, and mine are. Our skin is dark. I do have because I used to work in parks. I do have, look, I have bleached skin from the sun. And so do these officers. They're always out there in the traffic. You may claim to provide a service, but I do something neither of you will ever understand. You see the work, we work for a living. We are the workers who make sure the city of Phoenix maintains a high level of service. In about 4 years or so, you will have made your business constituents and others who fill your pockets happy to move along in your merry way. We, on the other hand, will still be a worker, and we are damn proud of it. And in closing, like Mr. Santos said, I talked to some employees. Last year, you guys cut some of the cooks. You outsourced the cooks. I had to go talk to one of those cooks over the, last weekend to tell her, she told me, come up there and fight. I don't have, I can't take another wage concession. I'm fighting here for her today. I'm fighting here for everybody, for the police officer, for everybody. For Phil Patton, who spoke to you, Mayor, last week at the council meeting, at the budget meeting. He's just a new employee from the city of Scottsdale who says, I can't afford to work here. Do we want our police officers to say that they can't afford to even work here anymore? And for Chelsea, a new water department employee who's here and she provides to make sure that the water is quality. And I talked to her too. And she's concerned about what's happening here. Phoenix just had an NEO a few weeks ago where 3 employees walked out of that NEO when they found out how much their pensions cost were. Do we want to keep Phoenix a place in a community that prospers, or do we just want to keep it a place that you blame and you blame and you blame and you cut? You've cut to the bone, and now you're just breaking the bones. To Mr. DeCicio's comment about the triple bond rating, that had nothing to do with the employees. That had to do with the housing market, the way it was recalculated. So let's just clarify that. So in closing, Mayor and City Councils and City Council members, Ed Zerker's been presented something that I don't like, we don't like. We don't want to keep taking concessions. It hurts us, it hurts our families, but it's something that will give you what you need. So he needs to be given some direction to get that, to work with us to meet the city's needs and demands. So in closing, thank you for the time. Thank you for everybody. And what I ask is, I know there's still a lot of proud police officers and their families who are downstairs. So if anybody from Unit 2 wants to, since our portion is over, give up the seats to them, I please welcome that. And again, thank you to all the city employees for the dedicated service you provide. I love Phoenix. We live in Phoenix and we serve Phoenix, but we need you to fix this deficit. We didn't create it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you. Mayor?
So, and for the record, there was I didn't count all of them, but it looks like hundreds of white cards not wishing to speak in support of Louis Schmidt and the position you've taken. So I want to make sure that
they're
you
in
get
support of the Hard Work and City employees.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And so, and then when I think we're going to have the opportunity for council members to make any, or ask any additional questions, make any additional comments that they may have. And then when it's all said and done, your folks were generous that if there are folks, when your portion is done, if they want to leave, and then folks representing members of plea or their families or other people want to speak on Unit 4 issues can come take the seats at that point.
Correct.
Okay. Vice Mayor.
First to Frank, appreciate his apology to Councilman DeCiccio. I know that's not easy to do, and so appreciate that very much. I guess I would just say this. I don't think any of you should take a pay cut, and I'm not going to be voting for one. So despite all the back and forth that you saw up here, this is inexcusable. We wound up here really through revenue projections that were way, way off, as Councilman DeCiccio talked about, and so forth. I believe Councilman DeCiccio is also not voting for the labor contracts. So 2 of us out of the 9 of us are voting against the labor contracts, against your pay cuts, effectively. So that's 2. I thought Reverend Maupin actually made an excellent point. You got to get 3 of the 5 Democrats. If you can't, in a time of, as Al DeCiccio said, I think the revenue is up $46 million from a previous year. You've got revenue increases, 2 votes just because we're doing it, despite whatever ideologies or everything. You start with 2 votes, and then if you still can't get to 5, you might want to look at who's leading the charge for some of your negotiations in the future. You might want to scratch your head and go, how are we losing in this scenario that I just laid out? I'd be questioning that. That would make me wonder. So I guess you might want to think about that as we go forward. I think yes, next week really will tell the tale. But I, for one, am not voting for your pay cuts. So thank you.
All right, other members of this council, Councilman DeCiccio, and then Councilman Gates.
Just a couple quick things, Luis, too, and thank you for your comments. And Frank, I didn't hear, I'm sorry, I went to get a glass of water. But
You had
thank
your
for saying
chance.
That, Frank, if you did. What's that?
You had your chance.
I know, geez, I would like to see, is it on tape or something? Are you here, Frank? Where are you? Are you here? Oh, well, thank you, Frank, either way. The other is just one point of clarification, if I could. What I'm talking about with the property tax is just basically a mismanagement that has occurred over the last several years. And that, I believe, is what created that credit downgrade before, and I think is going to create another one. Literally, if you're talking about forecasting that's off, this forecast is way off, and it's going to create, I think, a significant economic problem. The city of Phoenix, and for those of you that haven't heard this debate before, it's something I've been talking about. I've been saying, hey, look, our projections just aren't working. They're not true. And this one verifies that. Less than a year later, the projections are off by over $100 million. The city of Phoenix didn't expect to hit a minimum balance in the property tax, the secondary property tax, until 2022, 2023, something like that, around $70 million. Well, it's going to hit it in 2018. It's going to be almost zero in that account in 2018. That shows you how bad off those projections are. And that's where I'm saying is that I believe that property management mismanagement is going to create another economic crisis, and you're all going to be feeling the brunt of it as employees, and you should be demanding more from your politicians and from your staff. It's no longer your problem, quite frankly. It is really the people up here that created the problem, because the people up here are refusing to deal with this thing and to look at it in a way that's reasonable. So if you look at the amount of revenues that come in, and Mr. Waring, Vice Mayor Waring just talked about it, how do you have a deficit when you're at one of your highest peaks ever in the city of Phoenix, and you've got $46 million more? Do any of you believe this stuff, this BS? There's no way. It's not real. It's just not real. And the budgets you're getting are things meant to create angst. They're meant to create anxiety. They're meant to think about it, who cuts seniors? Who does that when there's logical ways to solve this thing? It's just not right what's occurred during this entire budget crisis. In 2010, I didn't agree with it then, created a big scare, and nothing came out of it, quite frankly. And it created a lot of angst. You can do that one time. You can fool the public once in the labor groups and others. And we've talked about this. It puts you guys in a bad position too. Go ahead, Louis.
Okay,
It's fine. You can always.
you yourself doubt the numbers you were given. So imagine what labor has to do. Imagine Joe Clure,
I
Will
don't know how to do
Bevides.
it.
I mean, no, imagine us as trying to negotiate a fair and equitable contract. We don't want to sit here and say we demand,
Mm-hmm.
but we have to take the same figures that you yourself question. That is what we've been questioning too. This deficit is, it's on a roller coaster.
I don't get it, and I'm a numbers guy. I'm a finance guy. I don't get it, how we can get to this point where it's this ridiculous. And I think it does it puts all your labor groups, the way this thing has been put together. Again, in 2010, they did something. You can do it one time. You can't do it twice. Okay, you just can't. And I think there was a more equitable way of putting this thing together that you guys would have been able to see something a lot more transparent than the way it was presented. So I feel bad for you. I mean, we're not always on the same side, that's for sure. I would hate to say that we're on the same side, then you might lose your job over there as the union leader. But at the end of the day, I think everybody's in this thing together. And I do want to make it really clear to the rest of the council and to the plea guys that are here. I do think that there's a difference here with police, especially right now with the amount of cuts that they've had, the amount of position losses that they've had. There's no clear plan in place to add another police officer, but the city voted for a $650,000 garbage studying your garbage, $650,000, but we didn't add one police officer. You know what I mean? The argument is it comes from different budgets. It's all money. It's all taxpayer money. So it's a lack of prioritization, lack of focus, lack of direction, and it's going to be one thing after another. This is what happened in Glendale, where they had one shoe drop and they thought that was a crisis, then another shoe dropped and that became a crisis, and the next one's going to be the property tax, and then guess who's going to have to bear the brunt of it? You are. You and your employees are going to have to bear it, or the public. Thank you, Mayor.
And on that, Mayor, if I could just comment on his comments. And look, we have to look at the city of Glendale. Councilman Valenzuela works there. Look at they keep making the headlines because of the high turnover rate, and that's the direction that the city's going in. But the city of Glendale saw the value of how bad the morale was, and they chose to give no matter how bad the situation is, no matter how bad we want to paint it here, they chose to give their employees the week of Christmas off, and they chose to give them an increase, police, fire, and the non-represented employees. And then the stance that you're taking today, Sal, the stance that, now there's a separation between public safety and everybody else. You're not saying fire, you're just saying plea. But where was that difference 6 months ago? No, let me finish, please, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Because
There's a
those
clear
attacks were
difference.
against every rank and file employee. And it was after the unfortunate event that happened earlier this year to Detective Hobbs, that's when the tide changed. So and we know that. So let's be transparent to the public.
You're right. Hobbs was a very eye-opening experience. It was an emotional
Detective
experience.
Hobbs.
It was Detective Hobbs. I'm sorry. I should have given him that level of respect. That was a very emotional experience, I think, for a lot of people up here, too. I think it also opened up a lot of eyes in the sense of there is a shortage out there. It's unfortunate that had to happen. I feel bad for his family. I can't imagine what's going through that family, his kids. I've got little kids. That, if anything, shows that there is a clear difference there. And then also the amount of violent crime that we've had. I mean, there's been a police shooting, 8 in February, up to February. We're on record-breaking pace. There's just a difference in that job function. And at least for this year and the year ahead of us, they need to be treated differently. And this poison pill that's created in these agreements, I think, is just wacky. It doesn't make sense. They should be treated differently. They just are different. They've got a different job function and different situation right now in the city of Phoenix.
All right, thank you very much, Councilman Gates.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I want to thank everybody for coming out this evening and speaking passionately. You know, there's nothing that we feel stronger about than when you're talking about pay cuts, and I really do appreciate what everyone's had to say. One of the things that really stands out for me this evening is we've had a lot of people come and talk about how they believe that their jobs can be done more efficiently in the city. And so as the chair of the efficiency subcommittee, I'm sure that I speak on behalf of the city manager and his team as well, that we want to hear your ideas. And the city, you know, working together with the private sector, working together with you all and management, been able to obtain almost 100 million in efficiencies. But I feel like there's a barrier here, and we need to break that barrier down. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your ideas. And this really gets to my whole view on this, which is we need to get back to working together. And we need to get back to the facts as well. So I had a couple questions for staff. On the increase budget, the increased costs that we have this fiscal year that we're talking about as opposed to the current fiscal year, what's been the increase in pension costs from 13-14 to 14-15?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Gates. For 13-14 to 14-15, the increased pension cost is about 13 million extra pension costs in the public safety pension that covers police and fire sworn, and about 5 million for our civilian employees in the City of Phoenix employee retirement system.
Okay, so that's about 18 million
Yes, sir.
in increased pension costs. So those are costs that we're having to bear as a city, and we got to figure out how to deal with that. That's not something that's made up out of thin air. Those are real costs that we need to address. How about workers' compensation? What's been the increase in workers' compensation costs?
Mayor, Councilman Gates, if I recall, I believe workers' comp is about 5 million. Is that correct? Yes. About a $5 million increase in our workers' compensation expense.
And how about health care costs? Has there been an increase in health care costs?
Mayor, Councilman Gates, healthcare is up between $1 and $2 million.
Thank you. So what I suggest, when we get through this and we get into the summer, we need to all work together to address these costs. And there's things that can be done. But it takes all of us sitting down at the table, because guess what? These are going to continue to increase. This is something that's bigger than all of us. It's bigger than the city of Phoenix, but we can work together on it. And so I'd like to see us moving in that direction. But it starts by being, being good folks sitting down at the table, being honest and transparent with one another. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilman Gates. Councilman Williams, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Following up what Councilman Gates said, first of all, thank you all for coming down and testifying today. It's very important that we hear what you have to say. And I guess because that one gentleman who said he submitted a $1 million cost saving and nothing happened beyond
No,
that?
I think it was Don Odell, you're speaking of, the mechanic, he did. His proposal that he submitted that the city did take saved $800,000.
The
If I had
first year.
if I had the city done it completely, it would have saved over $3 million.
Well, that's my point.
Yes.
Why didn't we do it completely? And I think that's something that I want to see management sit with employees and discuss how we follow through in the future. Because as I have mentioned before, the employees know where shortcuts can be, where we can have the cost savings, where we can save the inventory, how we can extend the life of a vehicle or a piece of machinery. You all know that. We don't. So we need to hear from you on how we can do that better in the future and save a lot of money. But I think you also made a great point that our costs are also increasing. And I know that another member mentioned the fact that many of the other cities are now giving raises.
Yes.
But I also want to point out, many of those other cities in the county put a freeze on salary for several years when this first hit, and that included freezing merit and longevity. The city of Phoenix did not freeze merit and longevity, and that has had an impact on us as well. And I think staff can show that I was told less than 1% of the employees failed to either get one or the other, merit or longevity. So they did get increases.
They took, anytime you take a furlough, the city has, for some of the AFSCME members, over 350,000 hours of furlough. So that has value. At the end of the day, when we came
It
up with the 3.2, you needed 3.2, Cavazos did. We gave that sacrifice. Each unit tailored it to what suited best for their members. Some took pay cuts and some did it other ways. But at the end of the day, everybody made less. Thank you.
And I will admit, in hindsight, knowing what I know now, had I known last October, I would not have removed the sales tax early. I think that you're correct. It's just about the amount that we're short.
Yes.
But I also think that 7% was based on the full food tax, and it was not adjusted in October. So I want to cut staff a little bit of slack there, because when that was published, they anticipated a full term of the food tax. And I think since then, we've not heard any discussion about that, and it does play a role in how the reduction happened. But I know you and I met yesterday.
Yes.
We talked about your proposal.
Yes.
I appreciate you putting that proposal in, but I find it very difficult to support it as it is. So I would encourage you to sit down and negotiate. I have 100% furlough concerns many people for a couple different reasons. And I think we need to think that through and continue discussing this in the future. And I don't want to see anybody's pay cut, but look at other options. I mean, and I will not support anybody continuing to spike pensions. I went through that long process last winter, and I can't support that, nor will the community people that I have talked to. But I think it's very important that we look at other options. I don't know. You know more than I whether it could be training funds, it could be, you have other options.
We have options, and we're willing to work with the city. We have a 42-year history, a proud history. And I just want to back up and say thank you, Councilwoman Williams, because for the first time publicly, a city council member has acknowledged, you know what, maybe that decision we made October wasn't the best one. And it takes bravery, and it took guts to do that. But you did. You're not just doing this, you know. Thank you for doing that.
Well, you're welcome, and I'm sincere about it. But that doesn't get us further today. So I really think that, you know, it's a hard time. I'm hoping that we can get through this period. I think there will have to be some concessions made one form or another. I think that some could be done, or maybe even most can be done without affecting the take-home pay, that we look at other options for 1-2 years. I think that's extremely important. And in the meantime, I think the city needs to really look at its structure. I think that it is time that we find new ways that are more efficient, that we can do the job, provide the service, and do it so it costs less. And because I don't want to see more employees laid off. I want to see more police officers. I think that's the top priority in this. And services, you're right, have been cut to the bone, literally. We've gone through the muscle, we're into the bone, and that doesn't serve anybody well in this entire community, whether the residents waiting for the service to arrive, whether it's turning on your tap and not having the right water, or you're waiting for a police officer or 911 operator to pick up. They're all critical, and I know that they're intertwined. It's just not just an officer. If he doesn't have a 911 person, he doesn't have people at the booking station, he doesn't have a mechanic taking care of his car, the system doesn't work. So I think this is important that we go back to the table, you sit down, negotiate, and really look at the options. You know, I don't care if it's training funds that could be cut in half for a year, or clothing allowance, or whatever it may be. But I encourage you to do that, because I think that's how we're going to get out of this as a temporary solution.
And to echo your comments about listening to the employees, about not trying to bring additional cost, that's exactly what the police officers were telling you last year about the uniforms. Because one person thought that he had to have it his way, didn't listen, didn't care about the cost, and we got into that. So I think there's areas where we can improve, some of the expenditures, some of the consulting fees. We're paying too much for consultants over and over again, and then nothing gets done. With Cavazos, when he was here, City Manager Cavazos, he asked some of the contractors, who, remember, I think over $460, $470 million annually that we contract out. Mr. Cavazos asked them for some sacrifices, when we were in that big deficit. I haven't seen the city manager ask the private sector to help us out, since they're here for profit. So that's another area we could look at.
All right, thank you very much. Other comments by members of this council relative to today's hearing? And so,
Mayor, I do. I have.
Councilman Alkowski, please. I'm sorry. Thanks for staying with us.
Mayor, just listening and sitting here and taking notes, the biggest problem we have right now is that we as council members have gotten false inflated revenue projections. The vice mayor talked about that. And we made our decisions based on that, from eliminating the food tax and all that. And as a result, we're in a deficit of close to $40 million. And, our friends at labor, we're always asking them to take a cut or concessions to help us through these tough times, and we continue to do that, right? And I think it's wrong. I think we need to find a permanent solution. I think we need to demand accurate projections. And, this mismanagement of false projections and numbers and all that, I'm not going to sit here and blame Ed as our new city manager. But going forward, this must stop. And Ed, I think you need to sit down and you need to figure it out. Because we as council members, we get these numbers and we base the budget on those projections. And if these projections are off, there's no way that we can make these hard decisions. And I hate when we have to put the community versus our great employees. Our employees that are wearing 2 to 3 different hats. You go to these budget hearings and you hear about all these great services, right? You hear about the great senior centers, the rec centers, the swimming pools, all the great services that we have as a city of Phoenix. But who's behind those services? It's our employees. Our employees giving that good service out there, that customer service, that's what makes us look good, and that's what makes us a great city. So putting our staff versus the community centers, it's just puts us in an awkward position. And I think that I believe we need to do is really sit down, and I'm asking that labor sit down with the experts. Because if you bring it to us as council members, as politicians, we're not experts in negotiating with you all on pension reform and all this stuff that you guys need to work out. You need to have experts work it out. And we have our experts at the city, you have your experts at the union, and we need to figure this out. And I really encourage our staff, I encourage the unions to sit down and let's work this out, because by May 7th, if we don't work this out, it's going to become a political football again. And it's going to be placed on our laps, and then it's going to be a bunch of individuals coming in talking about not losing their senior centers, their rec centers, closing their parks, ending all those great services that they have. So I like to see from our top manager, our city manager, come up with a solution on how are we going to give true projections and how we're going to fix this, and I just hope and I pray that we can actually fix this. And I hear our staff, and it's really sad to have you all come in and testify and give us these testimonies, because we know how hard you work. We know you guys are out there working hard and making us all look good. So it's a hard decision. I mean, you guys have to put yourselves in our position too, and it's just hard for all of us. So, city manager, if you could help us, and we got to figure out a way to, if it's a once a month where we actually get projections and we look at, because we talk about zero-based budgeting. Well, what is that? Is it monthly, or is it going to be actually on a quarterly basis where we can sit down and look at if we're off budget, if we're on budget, so we're not in this situation ever again. So that's my suggestion, and hopefully we can fix it before the next negotiation and before next year. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you very much, Councilman. Obviously, we have a long night ahead of us because we still have to do the presentation by our professional staff and from plea leadership on Unit 4. So I'd find out if there are any other comments by members of this council. I want to thank President Schmidt for oh, do we have Councilman Gonzalez? I apologize. Go ahead. No, jump in. I'm sorry.
No, 'cause I know that it is a long night, but I definitely want to say thank you to everyone who's doing the work. And I appreciate the leadership by everyone who's actually, every one of our city employees. It's a world-class city, and we all come up with these great ideas as policymakers. We're all doing the best we can, I think, to think outside the box. Recently, an example would be some of the public-private partnerships that we have been working out to help public safety, both police and fire, in West Phoenix. But even those ideas are worked through city employees, and they're possible because of our city employees. So I just want to thank you. I do believe that Louis Schmidt is a strong, not only city employee, but a strong representative. So for those of you who are being represented by Luis, I want to say, you know, this person shows up to these council meetings as often as any council member here, and he's representing you and your family. Jennifer, I would say the same about you as well. So you're being well represented. It's a tough position to be in, obviously. I think everyone can appreciate that. We are facing a deficit. The last time this happened, it was a larger deficit, much larger deficit, and every city employee took a concession, you know, about $100 million in a collective concession. Of course, the food tax, and you know, now we're running on our leanest government in 40 years. And we knew that this time around, though the deficit is not $277 million, it's $38 million, in many ways this is going to be tougher, because now we are really talking about, you know, cutting even deeper, and potentially cutting even deeper. And so it's a very tough position to be in. I think our city manager is also doing a great job, and his bargaining team is doing a great job. It's not over. You know, we still have about a week, and I would encourage everyone to get to the table and to continue to negotiate, because it's not over. The bottom line is, and I'm speaking not only as an elected official here who, like everyone here, represents people, but I'm also speaking as a city employee myself, though for a different municipality. And I know that my job, in fact, both of them, only exist to serve the public. And that's something that we all have in common. So I would encourage everyone to continue to get to the table and continue to negotiate. We are about a week out before this comes back, and I know that that's, you know, easier said than done. I know it's a lot to ask, but that's, you know, I would encourage everyone to continue to do that. I promise that I'll continue to keep, you know, the open door policy, and you know, have whatever discussions that anyone would like to have with me. I'll also continue to think outside the box, think of more public-private partnerships. As I said, we have worked a couple out of our office, specifically around public safety. We'll continue to work towards that, and we're open for any suggestions for anyone who's watching, any of our constituents. If you have any thoughts and ideas, we're open for them. So thank you.
Thank you, and I'm just going to close that. At the end of the day, this is not about an R or a D behind what you stand for. This is about people. This is about the families and the police officers, the firefighters, every rank and file employee and member of this community. It's not about R's or D's. Wake up, City Council. It's about the people and the services. Thank you, and this is not a difficult book to read. It's very simple. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Louis Schmidt. So we do have additional hearing to have, obviously, with Unit 4. So this public hearing is now closed. Next item on the agenda is motion to withdraw the item relative to Unit 3. Is that right, Mr. City Manager?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, so we can have a motion to withdraw item number 26.
Move to withdraw item 26.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Richard Ray and Dee Dee Barker. The motion is to withdraw that item because I think there is tentative agreement with Unit 3. So I don't know if you want to comment on that or not. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. As was indicated earlier, Mr. Schmidt asked that members of Unit 2 or people here for the Unit 2 issue, if you wanted to give up your seat now, because there are some people either in the Calvin Good building or outside that may want to come in at this time. So we're going to take a short break of the City Council, come back in about 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll get started with the hearing relative to Unit 4.